Absolutely, absolutely. Speaking of the politics, we got our brother Abdul Muhammad, who has been an educator in the Chicago public school system for 25 years. Now, last year it was the beginning of an ordeal to remove our brother from one of Chicago's public schools in the Inglewood community. And we're happy to have Brother Abdul to be a part of this conversation as he talks about his ordeal. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Abdul. How are you, sir?
Walaikum salam, Brother Faraji. How are you? And
I'm
welcome
good.
to your guests and your listeners. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brother Abdul, let's talk about what happened on that fateful day in March. What was you were the principal of a school in the Inglewood community of Chicago. Break that
Yes, sir.
down to me.
So, Brother Faraji, I've been in Chicago Public Schools and your listeners for 25 years. I was selected to be the principal at Lindblom High School, which is a selective enrollment school in the city. And on March 31st, I was removed from the school based on trumped up charges from 7 white staff members, 7 white teachers. I'm an award-winning educator. I won a Teacher of the Year. I was nominated twice for the Golden Apple. I was featured in Who's Who among American high school teachers for 4 or 5 consecutive years. So my work has been 100% in Black communities. And what happened when I was selected at Lindblom, which is what Ms. Morrow just brought out, it was politics at play, but it was also race that was a factor, because it's a school that's 90% Black and brown, but the staff is 95% white. They've never had a Black they haven't had a Black principal since the school reopened in 2005. I was the first Black principal since the school reopened, and only the second Black male principal in the 100-year history of the school. And I was the only Muslim principal. And when I came into that school and started holding white teachers accountable for what they were not doing, the white teachers, as well as the Chicago Public School District, they'd been working against me before, but they got together and collaborated with those 7 white teachers at Lindblom. So to answer the question on your screen, is Chicago School District working against Black educators? The answer is yes. And it's not because they're working against me, but if you look at the history of Chicago Public Schools, they have a 186-year history of working against the education of Black children and systematically working against Black educators. So before the attack was on Black principals, the attack was on Black teachers. When I first came in Chicago Public Schools, the district was 50% Black teachers. And now the district is 20% Black teachers. It is because through the policies of Rahm Emanuel and Mayor Daley and others, they systematically purged Black educators from being in front of Black children. So the attack on the principals is just the most recent attack that they have launched against the Black community.
Sister Kimberly, when you hear that, I mean, he's talking about the only the second Black male teacher in the school, first Black Muslim principal. He has a 95% white staff in a neighborhood that's predominantly Black and brown.
Right.
And
Sister Kimberly, talk to me.
It doesn't surprise me, but what I want to say to you, sir, is thank you. Thank you for bringing the public's attention to this. Unfortunately, when I went through my situation, I just wanted to get my job back. So I was trying to keep everything quiet. I am so glad that you are spreading the word. You are letting your voice heard, because there are other Black administrators who hear this, and they will be empowered by this, and they will know that you don't have to just be quiet and just hope that everything goes away. So thank you so much. Thank you.
I definitely appreciate it. And I want to say this, because as I've been raising my voice, Black educators have reached out to me from all over the country. So this is not just a problem that's going on in Chicago. I got a call today from Tucson, Arizona, and Dr. Brown in Tucson, Arizona is being opposed because she is trying to make sure that Black boys are not suspended at a higher rate and that Black girls are not suspended at a higher rate. And she's being opposed by the superintendent and other people in the Tucson, Arizona community. So this is not just an attack on Abdul Muhammad. What happened with me is they attacked me. They came against me with 83 false charges, 83 lies from 7 white teachers. And they did a bogus investigation and removed me from the school based on those 83 lies. So once they came against me and I stood up, sister like you, I've been in Chicago public schools for 25 years. This is not the first time that I have been attacked by Chicago public schools because of my religion. And nobody should be attacked and denied job opportunities and opportunities to grow in their career because of their race, because of their religion, because of their sexual orientation. But when I was attacked the first time by Chicago public schools for my religion, I didn't fight back. I just wanted it to be over with. I just wanted to continue to do my job on behalf of Black and brown children in the city of Chicago. But when they came this time and attacked me because of my religion and brought 83 false claims and false charges against me and wanted me to lay down and accept the lies that they said and did not fact check a single word of these white teachers, that is what I'm supposed to pass on to the Black children that I was standing in front of. So I didn't go out here to be a hero. I did what any normal human being that respects themselves, that loves Black people and loves Black children would do. I stood up and fought. And when I stood up and fought, other Black educators joined the fight. And now I'm getting calls and emails from Black educators from around the country because there is an attack on Black educators in places like Chicago, where, these white people here, they claim to be liberal, they claim to be progressive. The way that they attack is if it's a Black educators that's like you said, that's doing something that they don't like, as if it's up to them to decide what's best for our community, then they come with false charges. They come with a false investigation to remove that Black educator. But in places like Tucson, Arizona, where you have a majority white district and it's conservative, where Dr. Brown is fighting for Black children, then they don't come with the false investigation. They just come and remove the educator that's working on behalf of Black children. So we have the same thing happening in the so-called liberal areas in America, and we have the same thing happening in the so-called conservative areas. But listen, the attack is on Black educators, but in reality, it's an attack on Black children. Because what is going to happen in Black children in these spaces if there are no Black educators to properly educate them and to advocate them and to advocate for Black families?
Look, we got to take a quick pause, Brother Abdul and Sister Kimberly. Well, on the other side, I want us to continue to this because, Brother Abdul, you weren't the only one that was singled out. Now, you mentioned that, of course, because of your religion, of course, race plays into that.
Right.
But there were others that were ousted as well. And there are a lot of layers to your case because as you started to speak up, then other stuff was like Pandora's box has just been opened.
Absolutely.
And you started to experience a lot of things right there at your school of Lindblom and other places. And of course, we got to ask the big question, and you certainly could answer this on the other side, is what do you want to stay in the system? Do you want to go back to that school? And, I don't want you to answer that now.
Yes, sir.
But we'll certainly, get your answer on the other side. Crew, I want you to join us in the conversation as we checking in with Brother Abdul Muhammad, who is a principal, an educator of 25 years in the city of Chicago, who is deciding to use his voice, to use his platform to fight back against the injustices that he sees happening from the Chicago school district. As we're asking the question, is the Chicago school district working against Black educators? Brother Abdul said, absolutely, emphatically, yes. Sister Kimberly said, yes, because it has happened to me, and I want to hear from you. So post your comments on Roland Martin's YouTube channel in the chat. Post your comments on Roland Martin's Facebook page, and let's continue the conversation. Also, on the other side, we're going to bring in my sister, Corinne Denise, to be a part of the conversation. Stay with me. It's the culture here on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
When you talk about Blackness, and what happens in Black culture. We're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shooting.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Peace and welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Faraji Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation as we're just getting the beginning parts of this conversation around education, the state of education, and more importantly, we're asking a very specific question about whether the Chicago School District is the Chicago School District working against Black educators? Now, this question comes out of the great ordeal that our brother Abdul Muhammad, who has been an educator in the Chicago public school system for 25 years, folks. 25 years, this brother has been nominated and has been awarded some of the most prestigious awards given to educators and teachers across the country. But he was ousted last year as a result of false charges. He was ousted as a result. And we could probably go as far as to say, and I want to bring Brother Abdul and my sister Kimberly Morrow, who's an educator. Can we even say that there was some level of conspiracy? And I don't want to just use that word lightly, Brother Abdul, but talk to us. Do you feel like it was a conspiracy to get you ousted from the school system?
Oh, absolutely, brother. And I'll say, a conspiracy doesn't necessarily, conspiracies happen all the time. If two of us say we're going to rob the liquor store, you're going to be charged with conspiracy. The root word of the word conspiracy means to breathe together or to act together. And so, one of our brothers by the name of Jabril Muhammad said an orchestra doesn't play together on accident. So if you have an orchestra that plays, as many of us have been to the orchestra, it's not until the conductor comes out that all the instruments in the orchestra begin to play together. So when you see this concerted effort, so in my case, you have every department in Chicago public schools. You have the Office of Principal Quality, you have the Office of Network Support, you had the CEO, you had the law department, you had every office in Chicago public schools work together with members of the Chicago Teachers Union to have me removed from the school. That is a conspiracy. That is people working together to achieve an aim that is negative, but it impacts Black children. And so in my particular case, brother, you know, Black people have the right to self-determination. But what's happening in Chicago is that the Chicago public schools is denying Black people the right to self-determination. They're denying us the right to select the leaders we want. I didn't put myself in Lynn Bloom. The local school council, which only has two jobs. One job is to approve the budget. The other job is to hire the principal. The local school council, made up of Black, brown, and white members, they elected me unanimously to be the principal of Lynn Bloom. But because of my religion, Chicago public school officials tried to get the local school council to change their decision. And when the local school council refused to change their decision, that is when they worked for 8 months to undermine me. And to show you how corrupt some of these Chicago public school officials are, the local school council members that supported me, they opened up a fake investigation on them as well. So what are they telling us? They're telling us that you as Black people do not have the right to select your own leaders for your community. Chicago is the most segregated city in the United States. And we can't go to Pilsen, which is a large Latino area in Chicago. And I know the principal there personally, but we can't go to Pilsen in the Latino neighborhood and 2 or 3 Black teachers say, well, I don't like this Latino principal. He's the first Latino principal in the history of the school. I don't like him. It's a Latino neighborhood. It's a Latino LSC. But the 2 or 3 Black teachers who don't like him band together and have that principal removed. That's never going to happen. But this is what's happening in the city of Chicago. Our right to self-determination is being denied. And when the local school council members stood up behind me, who they elected, then the Chicago public school officials began to investigate them as well. So it's absolutely a conspiracy, but I don't want us to lose the focus. The focus is on our children. It's not just about a job, because as Ms. Morrow said, we can all just go get a job somewhere else, but it is about our children. And Black educators are being systematically removed from being in front of Black children. So that is the real focus of the attack. It is on Black children, and we have to fight back. And this is why I stood up. When I stood up, Brother Faraji, other principals stood up and joined the fight, because the same thing happened to them. We have a brother right here in Chicago who is the principal of Dunbar High School. His name is Gerald Morrow. And he was removed in December of 2022. It's January of 2024, and he does not know what he's been charged with. He's out of his school for a year, and they haven't even told him what he's done. That is the level of insanity that we're dealing with in the city of Chicago. So you asked me, is it a conspiracy? Yes. You asked me, are the Chicago public school officials working against Black children? If you're removing Black educators, you're working against Black children.
But there were some other things, and I want to bring in another voice in a few moments, my sister Corinna Denise, another educator. But there were some other elements of your case, that as a result of the ousting, you were one of 7 or 8 other.
Oh, I can give you. I can give you the stats. So when I started to fight back, and the other principals joined in, Sarah Karp, who is a famous writer for the Chicago Sun-Times and WBEZ, she's the one who exposed the story about Barbara Byrd Bennett that got her removed. She's also the one who exposed the story about special education that got CPS sued by the state. So Sarah Karp wrote an article, and when she used the Freedom of Information Act to find out how many principals Chicago public schools removed in 1 year, Sarah Karp, now we had already been saying that they're targeting Black principals. Sarah Karp, through the Freedom of Information Act, found out that there were 10 principals removed in 1 year. 2 white, 8 Black. So 80% of the principals removed were Black. Then we found out through Sarah Karp that 7 of the 10 were black men. So black male principals only make up 8% of the principals in Chicago public schools, but we're 70% of the removals. There's something wrong with that picture. So what we're sharing with you is Chicago public schools is targeting, like what they did with me. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm new. I was new to Lindblom. I just walked in the door. My first day was July 7th of 2022. And before the end of the year, before December, they had already started an investigation. And I just got to the school. So this is the level of insanity. They're targeting black principals. They're male and female, but there's a specific target on black males in a district that says they want to help young black men, but they're targeting their leaders. So that's the first thing that Sarah Karp found out in her article. The second thing that Sarah Karp found out in her article through going through the report is that the charges that they used against myself as well as some of the other principal were flimsy charges and not charges that would have a principal removed. For example, they said I came to late work one day, which was not true. But even if I did come to late work, is that a reason to remove a principal from a job? Like this is the level of insanity that we're dealing with in Chicago. And another thing that Sarah Karp's article proved that we had been saying all along is that the investigation was flawed. In the investigation that CPS did, they only interviewed the teachers the 7 white teachers. They did. There's 40 other people that are mentioned in the report. And they did not interview a single one of them. They only interviewed the teachers, the 7 white teachers that didn't want me, a black man, to be the principal of a black school in a black neighborhood after being elected by black people. So when Sarah Karp gave my investigative report to Joe Ferguson, the former OIG, Inspector General for Chicago Public Schools, he looked at it, and Joe Ferguson himself said that it was a flawed investigation. So that's everything that we had been saying, Sarah Karp agreed with. The only thing that Sarah Karp didn't deal with in her article that was in the Sun-Times on August 1st of 2023 is that not only were the charges petty, but the charges were 100% false, and we have the evidence to prove it. So this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a district that's targeting black leaders, specifically black male leaders.
I want to bring my 2 sisters into this. Corinna and Denise, welcome back to the show. Always a pleasure to have you, Corinna. Got my sister Kimberly Morrow. Kimberly, I want to get your take on this as you hear more and more details of this, because you were excited that we were able to get Brother Abdul to be a part of this conversation, to be on the show today. Now hearing more of the details around this, what's going through your mind? And then Corinna, I would love to get your take.
Here's what's going through my mind. This is standard operating procedure. Pretty much what he just said, I experienced. So the reason why I was quote unquote being investigated was because I called in sick the day before a 3-day weekend. And then when I did finally, came back after having been out ill all that time, some of the things were, well, you're not on your campus. You were off campus. Of course I was off campus. I was at meetings. I went to the other high schools to meet with a parent that high school principal called me over to meet with, and I had all of my documentation. So what has happened to the principals in Chicago happens in California, happens in Georgia, this is a nationwide issue. This is not just in the Chicago public school system. So as he was saying that, I was like, this is what they do. And it doesn't matter how long you've been doing your job. He said he's been doing his for 25 years. I had as well. I had been a teacher of the year. I had been who's who among high school teachers. It doesn't matter. I actually was questioned as to if I had taken my classes on campus at Harvard. I was like, wait, what? First of all, I went to Harvard in 1995. Were there online classes in 1995? No, we barely just got the internet in 1995. So they try to diminish our accolades. They try to diminish what we bring to the table. And this is not a citywide thing. This is nationwide.
Corinna, what's your take on this? And I know, and again, listening to Brother Abdul's story, listening to Sister Kimberly's moral story, what's your take of this? Because you are a college admissions advisor. You worked in the school system for years. You see all the stuff that is going on. What do you make of Brother Abdul's story?
Ooh, well, peace and happy Friday to all. First of all, I just want to say that, and shout out to all the educators, because we truly are the unsung heroes. And Mr. Muhammad, I'm truly sorry to hear what you're going through and what all the other principals in Chicago are going through. And man, just I got all kind of feelings stirred up in me, Faraji.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I too have had somewhat of a similar experience, not to that extent, unfortunately, that Kimberly and Mr. Muhammad have had based on today's conversation thus far. But I do know what it's like to be otherized, especially in your schools. And something that really came to the forefront is it's almost as if the biggest crime that you commit as an educator when they're looking to oust you out is the simple fact that you've rightfully earned the respect of the children and they really like you. And, once they really like you, it's kind of like, oh, that's it. You got to go. And it's kind of like only so much disruption per se before exile. And by disruption, I mean, actually cleaning up things and streamlining processes and make sure things are functioning and taking care of the school, right? Investing in the children and the culture and the parents and the families. And then oftentimes we end up here. But yeah, I have definitely seen it. Again, I have been in spaces where, I walk into the school building and I'm reminded that I'm Black every single day. I've been in spaces where, with the kids, they love you, the parents, most grateful, but specifically certain administrators and those who kind of have the power to make certain decisions will just be very calculated and forging a plan to find a way to remove you. And they're just waiting with bated breath sometimes for you to make maybe a single mistake or a slip up, and then they'll just, blow it up bigger than what it really is. So it kind of just really stirred up those feelings. I wish I could speak more to my experience, but again, legally there's just certain things I cannot. But yeah, it you think you kind of move past something, but man, I'm just like, I'm trying to restrain so much right now.
No, it's all right. And I understand. Corinna. I get it. I mean, it's yeah.
Man. Yeah,
it's very disheartening, and I know we got to take a quick pause. But Brother Abdul, CC Knight, one of our great crew members, watchers here on the show, she posed this question, and I think this is an important question. What is the mayor saying? Is there an independent entity within the school system or outside the school system that you can find some justice with your grievance?
Well, that's a great question. So first and foremost, the root of what all of the principals are going through in Chicago is there's no due process for principals in Chicago public schools. There's no due process. There's no job protections. So we don't have the same job protections as teachers. Anybody can come with false charges. They are the judge, the jury, the executioner. There's no secondary person that goes through the report and says, "Oh, well, this is not right." So you don't have that. When they removed me from the school and I emailed them, they told me that, well, we'll tell you what you did in 2 to 3 weeks. How did you remove me? And you haven't even told me what I did. And it wasn't until we threatened to sue them for defamation that they actually gave me the report and let me read it. And that's when I read through it and saw all of these lies, I started to gather the evidence to prove that everything they said was wrong. And then I had to go back to them with the evidence. I'm talking about clear-cut evidence that these were lies, and they didn't look at any of that evidence, and I was removed. So it's like the police investigating themselves. We already know how that's going to go. So one thing that we're demanding is that there's some other body that looks at principal removals and looks at the evidence for what it is, and not on the Chicago public schools and their leadership. To answer,
there's no union. We don't
have a union, not in Chicago. So what we have is a principals association. We just got bargaining rights in December, so we're not a union yet. We're still working on the contract. So we don't have a strong principals union. We only have an association. So now to answer, the only person that we can appeal to politically in Chicago to really deal with this situation is Mayor Brandon Johnson. And I'll say this, that in December of 2022, when Brandon Johnson was running for mayor, I had a conversation, I had a one-on-one Zoom meeting with, he was candidate Brandon Johnson at the time. And he asked me, he said, do you have any political support? I said, the alderwoman supports me, as well as the state rep, Stephanie Coleman and Sonia Harper. He said, that's fine. And, you know, the foolishness that Ms. Morrow just talked about continue to go on, false charges. And what the other sister just said, any little thing that they could use to try to blow up and use against you. I lived this for an entire year. And when they removed me on false charges on March 31st, we had a press conference at Father Flager's church on May 18th. On May 18th, we had the press conference, and then May 19th, we had another conversation with Mayor Brandon. He's the mayor now, with Mayor Johnson, and we shared with him again what was happening to myself as well as other Black educators. Because at the end of the day, he's the only one, he's the decision maker. He's the only one that can change what is going on in Chicago public schools. And what Mayor Johnson shared with us, he said, look, I'll have my people get back with you. You know, we're still waiting to have that conversation. Then when, so those are the two conversations that we've had with the mayor. The mayor knows what's going on in Chicago public schools, with principals, with educators. He's a former educator himself. At this time, he has not done anything about what's going on. We hope that he will do something in the very near future. You know, so I'll leave it at that. But the mayor is the decision maker. But I'll say this, because sometimes our politicians need a little more pressure from the public. So when this fight started, we created a website called Justice for Abdul Muhammad. And on the Justice for Abdul Muhammad website, I would love for everyone who's listening to go on Justice for Abdul Muhammad, and you can register for the website. We'll keep you updated. On the website, there's you can sign a petition. There's 3 things that we want you to do. One thing we want you to do is register. That's one. The second thing we want you to do is sign the petition. It's 4 things. The third thing is right there on the website, right there. You can email Mayor Brandon Johnson right there. All you have to do is click on his name, and the email will go straight to him. You don't even have to write anything. We've already composed the email for you, but click on the mayor's name, and it's going to go straight to his email, because at the end of the day, the mayor is the decision maker. You know, we say as Black people, and we're always happy to have a Black person that represents for us. So we have a Black mayor. We're excited about that. But we want our Black politicians to actually work on behalf of Black people. Sometimes that requires pressure from the public. So we want you to send that to Mayor Brandon Johnson. The last thing that you can do, if you so choose, is there is a GoFundMe on that same website. You can click on that, and if you so choose, you can donate to the GoFundMe as well. So we have had that mayor we have had conversations with the mayor. We haven't had any results, and we're hoping that we can have a future conversation so we can resolve this issue. But at the end of the day, Mayor Brandon Johnson is the decision maker when it comes to Chicago public schools.
We got to take another quick pause. When we come back, Brother Abdul, I want to kind of get some final thoughts from you in terms of what type of parental and community support have you gotten around this issue, and has it pushed the needle a little bit further along to solidify the unity behind you and those others who were ousted unjustly? We'll continue to talk about that, folks.
Absolutely.
Stay with us. Continue to post your comments as we're streaming right now on Roland Martin's YouTube channel. Check us out in the chat there. Excuse me. And you can also check us out on Roland Martin's Facebook page. And let's continue the conversation on the other side as we're talking about the state of education. We're asking the question, is Chicago School District working against Black educators? The answer right now is yes, it is. Yes, it is. And this is not the only district that is doing so. So we'll continue the conversation on the other side here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
When we talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Abdul Muhammad. We have been having a very, very in-depth conversation about what's going on in Chicago public schools as we've been hearing the story and the trials and tribulations of the one principal who's an educator for 25 years in the Chicago public school system, Brother Abdul Muhammad. And he has laid it out, the ongoing experience, the ordeal that he's been a part of as he is fighting against the school system there in Chicago for Black children, and more importantly, fighting to make sure that our representation, our presence in the classroom stays intact. And along with Brother Abdul, of course, I'm joined by my sisters that I do every Friday, Sister Kimberly Morrow, got my sister Corinna Denise as well. Brother Abdul, I want to, as we wrap up this part of the conversation, I just will let you know, one, we're going to support you here on The Culture on the Black Star Network. So you do have a place and a platform to keep us up to date. And I know there are some things, and I'm going to ask you, to talk about what the next steps are in this process. But what has been the community's response and feedback? What is the parental feedback that you have received in light of all that you have already gone through?
Well, brother, I'll say this as a 25-year educator and phenomenal educator in the Black community. And I want to just share real quick because I need our people to understand that Chicago Public Schools is removing the best educators in the city of Chicago. Every school that I've been in, I've gone into that school and transformed the school, increased the attendance, increased the graduation rate, increased the grades at every single school that I've been in. Some of your listeners may be familiar with the city and the various schools in the city. But I started on the west side of Chicago. And from there, I transitioned to the south side. I was at Westinghouse. I was at Chicago Vocational High School on the south side of Chicago. I was at Simeon. While I was at Simeon, Jabari Parker is one of my former students, as well as Kendrick Nunn, who are in the NBA, as well as Blake Hickman, who was in Major League Baseball, because Simeon's a big sports school. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up. And from there, I went to a school named Percy L. Julian, which is on 103rd in Chicago. And I'm bringing this up because your listeners hear about Chicago all the time. And there's the same narrative about the shooting, the killing, the violence, the gangbanging. And you would think that there's nobody in Chicago that's doing anything about it. And that's not true. I'm working with the very young people in the city of Chicago. From there, I transitioned to a school called Nancy B. Jefferson, named after a civil rights leader. But the unique thing about Nancy B. Jefferson is it's located inside of the juvenile detention center in Chicago. So even though I work with all of these different young people in all of these neighborhoods, when I got to Nancy B. Jefferson, I'm working with the very people that you see on the news. And I'll give you an example that most people are familiar with. There was a young 14-year-old girl from the west side of Chicago that went to John Hope High School and shot her friend, who I believe was 14 as well. Her uncle brought her a gun from the west side, and she shot her friend. And this was all over the news. But I know that young lady. She's one of my former students. So these were the children at Nancy B. Jefferson that were locked up for various crimes in Chicago. And when I got to Nancy B. Jefferson and I worked with the young people, and they told me it's 85% Black boys at this school. And I worked with these young brothers. And when I was there, this was the first time that the various gang bangers that were locked up could be in the same room together. The GDs, the BDs, the Vice Lords, the Four Corner Hustlers, the Latin Kings, the Black Souls, the EBK. This was the first time we could put them all in the same room and there not be a confrontation. This was the first time where young Black boys who were incarcerated cared about graduating from high school because I work with those young brothers and we changed the culture of the school that's inside of the juvenile detention center. So while we see all of these things happening, there are people here that are transforming the lives of children every day. And we're being attacked because of that transformative work that we're doing in Chicago. But because I have this track record, when this happened to me in Chicago, people who knew me, knew my track record, of course, they stood up. Father Flager, I've known this man for 20 years or longer. I would bring my students to the peace tournament basketball games that Joakim Noah and Derrick Rose put on at Father Flager's church every year. So, when this happened, the community stood up. Of course, the brothers and sisters who are in the Nation of Islam stood up. Educators who know my track record stood up. We have Attorney Crump that's supporting us as well as, we have Black politicians. So you asked about some of the next steps. We met with the Legislative Black Caucus for the state of Illinois. And the Black Caucus for the state of Illinois has agreed to have hearings in the state legislature regarding Chicago Public Schools removal of Black principals. So the Black Caucus is supporting us 100%. We also have Black aldermen that are supporting us as well. So we do have political support. We do have some support from the religious community in Chicago, parents, students, and fellow educators. But again, we want to increase that support. So we've been doing a lot of community work. When I say we, I'm talking about myself, the other principals, and the Principals Association to build that support for the principals. And it's really support for Black children because we are the educators that are in front of the children every day.
So you do have a meeting scheduled next week to talk to some of the Chicago or the Illinois state legal representatives to get their, as it relates to, the equal opportunity, and possibly, is this on the table, a class action lawsuit? Is that being discussed right now?
Yeah, well, that I don't know. We have a meeting about that next week, but there are lawsuits in the works, so we're working on that right now. The legal process takes time. So we've started that process. We started that process months ago. We have a meeting next week with a civil rights attorney. We also met with Sister Kimberly Clark, who's the Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Civil Rights. She's very interested about what's going on in Chicago as far as discrimination against Black educators for religion, for race, and whatnot. So we did meet with her and her entire team via Zoom. So we're trying to bring as much attention to this as we possibly can. And this is why we want your listeners to go on the website, justiceforabdulmuhammad.com, so that we can keep everybody updated. I'll come back as much as I can, and as often as I can to update your listeners. We also have the NAACP, both presidents in Chicago, the West Side chapter and the South Side chapter are supporting us. We have a meeting with them next week, and we're trying to get national support from the NAACP because, as Ms. Morrow said, this is a national issue. Like I said earlier, I got a call from Dr. Brown from Tucson, Arizona. The same thing is happening to her. About 3 months ago, I got a call from a brother from New York. He said the same thing is happening to him. Every time I go on a television show or a radio show, an educator calls in and says the same thing happened to them. You know, I decided to fight, and because I'm fighting, we have other Black educators that are joining the fight. And I know we're running out of time, so I want to say this. When we saw the brother get attacked in I believe it was Montgomery, Alabama, and he was standing on the dock, and the white guy attacked him and tried to fight him, and he was only doing his job. Black people around the country and around the world, when the Black people joined together and worked together and fought back, Black people celebrated them. You saw people putting folding chairs on their Twitter as their Twitter handle and whatnot, or their Facebook profile picture, or whatever the case may be. But we celebrated the fact that Black people stood together and fought in the face of disrespect and racism. And so that fight was important, but the fight that we're engaged in is a much more important fight because we're fighting for the minds of Black children. And you have Black educators that are on the dock of Black educating. We're throwing the hat up in the air, and we would like our people to join the fight. And you can join the fight by going on justiceforabdulmuhammad.com. You can register, sign the petition, and send an email on that site to Mayor Brandon Johnson. If you decide to support, you can support by donating to the GoFundMe. All of that is on the website, justiceforabdulmuhammad.com. So we want you to join this fight for the minds of our children.
As we wrap up to this part of the conversation, first and foremost, we can't thank you enough. And I'm so happy to be a part of this effort to get the word out and to talk about these issues that many educators like Corinna, Kimberly Morrow, many folks know exist, but we are confined and restricted from actually talking about. So this gives light to something. Absolutely. But the big question that I want to ask you, and I know it was posed to you by many people, do you want to go back into the system? Do you want to go into keep this fight on? Because some folks might be listening and say, well, Brother Abdul, you're a Muslim. You understand, you know, and the great Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan often talks about we must divide, you know, create our own. Do you want to go back into the school system?
So to answer that question, absolutely, because, and I had this conversation with the minister as well as with others, but definitely with the minister. Brother, the thing that we have to understand is the public school system is where our children are. If your children were in a burning house, right, and that's what the public school system is, it's a burning house. And if your children were trapped in a burning house and you were standing outside and somebody asked you, do you want to go in there and save your children? Like it's a foregone conclusion. Those are my babies. I'm going in the house. No matter what's in the house, I'm going in the house. And we've seen parents out of the love for their children go and challenge the flames to save their children. So if you ask me, do I want to go back? The answer is yes, because I love Black children and they're trapped in a system that does not love them and would not give them the education that they deserve and the treatment that they deserve without Black educators who love them and care about them and want to give them the best of what they can get in the public school system. So we have to go after our children wherever they are. And this is not a slight against white children, because you have white children and Latino children who are being impacted negatively by the same system. We have to change the system where the system benefits all of us, or as Black people, we have to make the decision to remove our children from this system if we can't change it and make it to benefit everybody that's in the system. So if you ask me, do I want to go back to continue to save the lives of Black children? Although I've suffered in this system, the answer is 100% yes, because I love my people.
There it is, Brother Abdul Muhammad, principal educator in the Chicago public school system. We thank you, dear brother, for your time. We thank you for sharing your story. Again, folks, go to the website, Justice for Abdul Muhammad. You can be a part of the solution here, as you can help, galvanize and show your support, not only for Brother Abdul, but for other educators, Black educators and administrators who have been ousted. But this is the site to just galvanize the support. So you can take action, as the site says. You can join the site. Also, send a letter directly to Mayor Brandon Johnson, the new mayor of the city of Chicago, and let your voice be heard. Brother Abdul, we're going to do our part, as I mentioned, but more importantly, we'll bring you back on. You know, you got some important conversations and meetings next week, so God willing, we'll bring you back on after that point to get the latest from you. But thank you, dear brother. We truly appreciate it.
Thank your listeners and your co-host and guests. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk about how Black mothers are calling for educational reform. You had a number of Black women who rallied in Washington, D.C. yesterday to call about education reform, to talk about the issues of bullying, active shooters, and curriculum development, and so much more. Folks, there's a lot of movement that's happening. Folks are looking to change the dynamic of power in the educational system. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So stay with us. That conversation is up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.